Tonight, a funding boost and a review as the state grapples with rising homelessness. Why it's getting easier to find a bulk billing GP, but not for everyone. Tackling a crisis behind the scenes of Queensland's youth crime frontline. And the long arm of the claw. Police rescue a 3-year-old whose curiosity got the better of him. Good evening, Jessica Van Vonderen with ABC News. More than 45,000 Queenslanders sought help from homelessness services last financial year. Workers in the sector say they've never seen such demand. Now the state government has announced a $70 million funding boost and a review of the system ahead of a housing plan next week.
Hotels and motels have been this Brisbane family's home for 6 months.
It's pretty crap at the moment.
Homeless, they've been shuffled between emergency accommodation while they wait for government housing. The instability is taking its toll.
To the point where I couldn't even sleep at night. It would be amazing to have a house that we can call ours and our home.
Signs of the housing crisis are everywhere. Queenslanders living in tents and out of their cars.
But I keep my stove in there.
We know in Queensland this is not good enough. And so we've been asking for extra funding so we can do more.
The state government today committed to boosting funding for specialist homeless services by 20%, which is an extra $72 million.
This money gives us hope that the absolutely dire situation we're currently confronting will not continue indefinitely.
There'll also be a review of the system led by a familiar face, the state's former top public servant, Rachel Hunter.
Someone like Rachel knows the ins and outs of the public sector, so she's perfectly equipped to do this job.
If you're bringing in a fresh set of eyes, there have to be a fresh set of eyes.
Ms Hunter only recently left her position due to Anastasia Palaszczuk's resignation and received a hefty payout. The Premier says Ms Hunter's offered to do this review for free.
They hadn't settled on an arrangement, so I rang Rachel and she immediately offered to do it pro bono.
The government's yet to say when the review will start or finish. The state's new housing plan is expected to be unveiled next week. Kate McKenna, ABC News.
Piles of destroyed possessions are growing north of Brisbane as hundreds try to recover from a second flood in 2 years. The government is probing the state's preparedness and response to the disaster, but some are calling for a new buyback scheme so they can leave a nightmare behind.
The streets of Bray Park are a dumping ground for furniture. Lives reduced to piles of possessions that just keep growing as the clean-up from another flood continues.
Fix the problem, mate. The government and the council have got to get this right.
After every disaster, we do a review of what happened, of our response and of what's needed for recovery.
Days after Monday's flood, the damage bill is still rising.
Family, friends, random people from over the streets helping us, just dragging everything that belongs to us out in the front.
Reggie Matthews lost more than $100,000 after the tide swallowed his tools, car and home.
I didn't actually realise it was my roommate Justin. He thought we were getting broken into. He's rushed up, just said, Reggie, we're getting flooded.
I woke up to the fridge, flipping from the water and broke the glass window, but that's before I knew it was flooded. And I thought someone was breaking in, so I jumped up into a pile of water.
That water inundated 400 homes across Bray Park, including Blake Cohen's, who'd been thinking of moving since the 2022 floods.
Obviously now it's probably going to be a bit harder for us. It's like no one's going to want to buy a house that's been flooded twice in a few years.
Residents are calling on the state and federal governments to consider buying back repeatedly affected properties from owners, similar to what was done after 2022.
If the Queensland Government wishes to come to us with a new proposal, then we'd of course consider that.
It would definitely help us, follow our mission this year to get our own new place, like a dream home type thing.
Toby Jers-Lewis, ABC News.
New government data shows bulk billing rates are on the rise. It follows last year's budget, which raised the incentive paid to GPs when they bulk bill children, pensioners and concession card holders. Doctors have welcomed the news, but say there's still a long way to go to make doctors' visits affordable for all.
Okay, so next week for the board report, we'll need...
Once Gemma Sims has paid rent and all of her family's costs, she doesn't have much left for visits to the doctor.
When I do access a GP, which I haven't for a very long time, it's really expensive.
She has a healthcare card, but she says she hasn't been able to find any clinics that bulk bill, and she's been prioritising her children's medical appointments.
I'm missing out. I haven't been to the GP in at least 3 years.
To help people like Gemma, in last year's budget, the government raised the incentive it pays to GPs to bulk bill. It says it's working. In the first 2 months, bulk billing rose 2.1 percentage points.
In November and December alone, just 2 months, there were 360,000 additional free visits to the doctor.
The Health Minister says some of the biggest increases in these appointments have been in regional areas and in Tasmania, where bulk billing rates have been low.
We need to have in mind continued access for the most vulnerable and disadvantaged people in our community.
Of course we want to see more increases into the future, but we've managed in one short year to stop the slide and to start to see a turnaround.
When Peter Dutton was Health Minister, the bulk billing rates were about 84%. Under Mark Butler, just over 77%.
GPs want further increases to Medicare rebates paid to primary care providers.
If you invest in general practice, we get the outcomes that are needed for our patients.
That would help people like Gemma Sims.
I've seen no difference, and it's certainly not made it any easier for me financially to access medical care at all.
That means universal healthcare remains out of her reach. Rachel Carbonell, ABC News.
All children should sit out sport for at least 21 days after a head knock under new guidelines for concussion. The advice for all grassroots and professional sports has been broadly welcomed, but concerns have been raised about educating the tens of thousands of volunteers who coach kids.
17-year-old Brianna Wong knows all about concussions.
I had symptoms for about a week and a bit, which was blurred vision. I had migraines. It was pretty bad.
Under new Institute of Sport guidelines, if she was concussed again, she'd have to sit out her sport for at least 3 weeks and be free of symptoms for 2 weeks before she could start contact training.
I think it's an amazing idea. With this now, you have a structure to follow and you know how long you're going to be out for. You know what the protocol is when it happens.
We're unashamed in having a real focus on youth and community sport because that's where there's an absence of healthcare practitioners. That's where 95% of concussions happen.
The AIS developed the guidelines with colleagues in Australia, New Zealand and the UK.
The best way to protect the health and well-being of athletes at the youth and community level is to have one set of guidelines that everybody follows so there's no confusion or disagreement.
But there are concerns players may not report their concussions.
If I report this, then it probably is going to mean that I'm 21 days out of playing. Then they may or may not be likely to report it.
Brianna's father, Terry, would have the job of explaining the guidelines to more than 100 coaches at his local club.
It does come down to education. I think most of our coaches and managers want to make sure that their players' welfare is at the forefront.
The AIS has also recommended professional athletes not return to contact sport until they've been free of concussion symptoms for at least 10 days. That would be a big extension on the current guidelines for the country's biggest football codes, rugby league and Australian rules. A spokesman for the Australian Rugby League Commission told the ABC it's reviewing the Institute of Sport's guidelines to see how they could apply to rugby league, while the AFL is also reviewing its current concussion guidelines ahead of the 2024 season. David Mark, ABC News.
It's been hailed as a major success, a squad of specialist detectives working to crack down on Queensland's youth crime. This Dateline story from Victoria Pengilly reveals Task Force Guardian has arrested hundreds of repeat offenders since it was created. But is it actually solving the problem?
It's a weekday afternoon in North Brisbane. Top detectives are driving the streets in an unmarked police car. This is Task Force Guardian,
A newly created squad of specialist officers travelling across Queensland tackling youth crime.
It's a good opportunity to show a bit of presence for us and increase community confidence that police are out there and that we are looking out for their safety.
Today they're focusing their efforts on a busy shopping centre bus station. Within minutes, they locate a 16-year-old they suspect is in possession of drugs. The exchange becomes heated. The teenager is taken to the local police beat, where he's met with a youth justice caseworker who's part of the specialist team.
Man, I'm a 16-year-old child and you're using all that force.
We could see at the top of his pants on the rubber there was a clip-seal bag of cannabis was sticking out, and he refused to give that up.
That's a wife.
Since Task Force Guardian was created in 2023, more than 800 people have been arrested, suspected of 2,600 crimes. The overall crime rate in Queensland is going down, but the severity of offences is increasing.
What we are seeing, and it's disappointing, but we're seeing the rate of offending from that small cohort increasing, and I'm very concerned what we're seeing is the level of violence that some of those crimes are coming with.
There are hotspots. In Townsville, the rates of assault, robbery and unlawful entry are higher than the state average. But advocates argue the problem can't be solved by locking up more children.
International research would indicate that the tougher we are on youth crime, the more of a crime-causing effect that can have.
According to law professor Tamara Walsh, Queensland has the highest number of children on remand in the country. 86% of those kids don't record a conviction. As night falls, officers are conducting a bail check on a 14-year-old girl. The patrols are designed in part to improve public confidence, something authorities admit is top of mind during an election year.
It's easy to demonise them. It's harder to recognise the challenges that these children have faced in their lives and to demonstrate a commitment to addressing these children's basic needs.
As you can see here, from all walks of life, if you want to call it good or bad families, all socio-economic backgrounds, it doesn't discriminate.
A complex problem with no easy solution. Victoria Pingilly, ABC News, Brisbane.
The UN's main agency providing aid for Palestinians is under pressure to restore confidence with its donors before its money runs out at the end of this month. At least 12 countries, including Australia, have temporarily suspended funding for UNRWA after Israeli allegations against some of its workers.
At one of only 3 entry points into Gaza.
And the police officers are pushing and shoving, and the protesters are doing the same.
Israeli protesters try to blockade trucks from entering. Hundreds have descended upon the Kerem Shalom border crossing for a week now, demanding no aid for Gaza until all hostages are released. In another blow for civilians in Gaza, the Israeli Prime Minister met with ambassadors to the UN, telling them the biggest UN aid provider to Palestinians must go.
UNRWA is totally infiltrated with Hamas.
The agency fired 9 workers and launched an investigation after Israel claimed they had participated in Hamas's October 7 attack.
UNRWA's life-saving services should not be jeopardized by the alleged actions of a few individuals.
The allegations prompted several countries, including Australia, to halt funds for UNRWA.
These are deeply concerning allegations, and we have made clear they need to be thoroughly investigated.
The UN agency is now in a race to persuade donors that they have responded inappropriately before money runs out at the end of this month. Time is everything. A new UNICEF report says supplies of nutritional food are virtually finished. Another confronting figure from UNICEF. An estimated 19,000 children in Gaza are now orphans or have no adult to care for them. This girl was delivered by C-section. Her mother was killed by an Israeli bomb before she could name her child.
We've lost connection with her relatives. Nobody came.
born into a dreadful war and a bleak future. The girl with no name. John Lyons, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Some of the world's leading social media companies have been accused of having blood on their hands during a fiery hearing in the US Senate. 5 tech bosses were grilled over whether they're doing enough to protect children on their platforms. Behind them sat families whose loved ones took their own lives after being victimised online.
The faces of the young and vulnerable held up as tech chiefs from 5 of the biggest social media companies took the oath.
This is my daughter, Olivia.
This is our son, Matthew. Look at how beautiful Miriam is.
Republicans and Democrats want big tech to answer for the abuse and exploitation of children on their platforms.
I know you don't mean it to be so, but you have blood on your hands. You have a product. You have a product that's killing people.
37% of teenage girls between 13 and 15 were exposed to unwanted nudity in a week on Instagram. You knew about it. Who did you fire?
The boss of Facebook and Instagram, Mark Zuckerberg, came under the most scrutiny.
Would you like to apologize for what you've done to these good people?
No one should have to go through the things that your families have suffered.
Senator, we are devastated.
The head of Snapchat was also under fire.
There are a number of parents whose children have been able to access illegal drugs on your platform. What do you say to those parents?
We work very hard to block all search terms related to drugs from our platform.
The CEOs defended their business practices, including child safety features.
We make careful product design choices to help make our app inhospitable to those seeking to harm teens.
It is time for a federal standard to criminalize the sharing of non-consensual intimate material.
There is a proposed law to rein in tech companies and hold them accountable for what's shared on their platforms. In a Congress paralysed by partisan divides and political infighting, even agreement on this issue hasn't been enough to change the landscape yet. Carrington Clark, ABC News, Washington.
And if you or someone you know needs help, please contact Beyond Blue by phone or their website. Or if you're experiencing distress, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14. Despite 13 interest rate hikes since May 2022, house prices are on track to continue rising across the country. Agents say the market is being propelled by renters and migrants wanting to buy their own homes, and buyers trying to get in ahead of interest rate cuts expected later this year.
And $1,050,000 for the third. Final call.
In Australia's second biggest property market, buyers are holding their nerve.
All finished. Well, the bid's here, ladies and gentlemen. Formally pass the property into this lady here. She'll have first exclusive rights at the vendor's reserve.
Behind closed doors and after some negotiation on price, Natalie manages to secure her first home.
It's definitely been difficult and stressful trying to figure out whether we'll be able to afford the mortgage repayments if interest rates go up, but hopefully now that they've started to settle, we should be okay.
Prices rose nationally by 0.4% in January and 8.7% over the year. It marked the 12th straight month of gains driven by Perth, Adelaide and Brisbane. Darwin and Sydney rose marginally, while Melbourne, Canberra and Hobart went backwards.
Nationally, we're expecting house prices to rise in 2024, but probably at a slower rate than what we saw last year.
For those looking to break into the market, getting a home loan might be easier. The Reserve Bank is expected to keep rates on hold at its next meeting, but economists are tipping there might be rate cuts later this year.
$1,690,000.
We expect moderate falls in property prices this year, averaging around 3 to 5%. Lower interest rates might provide a bit of support later this year, but the big risk to all of this on the downside is if unemployment rises significantly, and that could result in deeper falls in property prices.
For now, finding a dream home is still hard for most. Nassim Khadem, ABC News.
To finance now, and the local share market and the Australian dollar both fell today after the US Federal Reserve poured cold water on hopes of an early rate cut. Here's Alan Kohler.
America's interest rate setting committee met last night, and after the meeting it was a game of two halves. The statement came first, and in it the Fed went from talking about when rates might go up to when they might go down, which is called shifting from a tightening bias to an easing bias. And then Chairman Jerome Powell held a press conference and was asked, "What about March?" And he replied, "Nah, sorry, unlikely." The US dollar jumped at that point, and on the share market, shoulders and prices slumped. So the Aussie dollar fell, and Australian share prices fell also for the first time in almost a fortnight. The banks that have been running hot had the biggest falls, while the lithium miners went down as well, as usual. But look, financial market punters might be gnashing what's left of their teeth, but this is good. The Federal Reserve has managed to get inflation under control without a recession and with barely an increase in unemployment at all. It's called immaculate disinflation. Markets and the Fed members themselves are forecasting much lower US interest rates, down from 5.25% to 3%. And that's good news for Aussie borrowers as well, because the Reserve Bank won't want to be a shag on a rock with a cash rate above 4% when that happens. And speaking of Aussie borrowers, as you've heard, the other side of the ledger, the asset side, is still rising, or at least the national median house price is, although it is getting patchy and the monthly growth rate is well into a decline, as you can see. And that's partly because the shortage is disappearing as the immigration comes down and housing completions rise a bit. And that's finance.
Coming up on 7:30, Sarah Ferguson asks the UNICEF chief, Catherine Russell, about accusations employees at the UN Refugee Agency were involved in the October 7 attacks.
And this is an unprecedented sort of allegation that's been made against these people. I think, obviously from our perspective, the last thing we want is anybody working for the United Nations who does anything, associated with terrorists and with organizations that are destructive to other people.
Australian all-rounders Mitch Marsh and Ash Gardner have won the country's highest honours in cricket. Gardner won the Belinda Clark Award for the second time in 3 years, and Marsh fought back tears when accepting the Allan Border Medal.
A popular winner who just became even more relatable.
I'm a bit fat at times and I love a beer, but I've had a few people come up and ask for photos this morning saying they're a bit fat too.
The throwaway line punctuated an emotional acceptance speech in which Mitch Marsh thanked coach and captain.
You believed in me.
And his wife, Greta.
I thought I was done and dusted, but I often spoke to my wife about Dad, I just wanted to get one more crack at it, and it's been amazing.
A player who didn't make the most of his opportunities. Marsh once declared Australia hated him, but an Allan Border Medal win has capped off a great comeback tale after a season highlighted by an Ashes century and 200s at the World Cup.
To be back into the Test team now after a long time out, it's been an incredible 6 months.
And the winner of the Belinda Clark Award is Ashley Gardner.
For the second time in her decorated career, Ash Gardner won cricket's highest honour. An all-rounder, Gardner's bowling shone in particular as she took more wickets than any of her teammates.
I think my bowling has probably evolved a lot quicker than kind of what I was thinking.
He's not thinking about awards just yet, but Xavier Bartlett could make his national debut against the West Indies in tomorrow's opening one-day international match at the MCG.
I mean, it's just amazing to be here and the opportunity to rub shoulders with these sort of guys. Still definitely pinching myself for that.
Fellow paceman Lance Morris is also in line to debut as Australia fields a relatively inexperienced side. Tom Maddox, ABC News, Melbourne.
The Maroons will have a new look coaching lineup as they aim to win 3 straight Origin Shields. Assistant coach Cam Smith is stepping down from his role after 2 series under Billy Slater. The former hooker, who holds the most caps for the Maroons, wants to coach locally at the Currumbin Eagles. He'll be replaced by Brisbane Broncos development coach Matt Ballin, who played for Queensland in 2010 when Smith was injured.
It's exactly the same as the playing days. He was always in front of me as a player and always in front of me as a coach. But I'm lucky to get an opportunity.
Now to a story about an inquisitive toddler who got stuck in a shopping centre toy machine. It took officers from a tactical crime squad to get him out.
It was a case of claw and order after mischievous 3-year-old Ethan Hopper climbed into this toy machine dispenser in Brisbane's south.
Glass? Perfect. Glass.
It took him seconds to get in after evading his parents.
If he goes to that back corner, you can tab it, but this one here, yeah.
Used to arresting hardened criminals, the quick-thinking officers came up with the perfect tactical response.
Are you able to get him to that back corner? Hey, Ethan, go to that back corner. Go to that corner over there. Go to mum.
To his delight, it was all part of the game.
Now, Ethan, cover your eyes, hide.
He's peeking.
Then, with the swing of a hammer, he was freed.
Come here, buddy. There you go.
The inquisitive tot later fronted the media with his relieved parents.
Well, it's quite funny. I messaged my old man and he asked me how many $2 coins do I have? We can try and win them back.
He was stuck for 10 minutes yelling out free toys to his bemused parents.
He was having the time of his life.
As for when the call came in...
And this is the first in 11 years of policing. Wasn't expecting this one to come up.
Ethan finally got a cuddly toy as his prize.
That's all right.
Then it was high fives and a big hug. A cheeky toddler with a cheeky tale to tell. Lexi Hamilton-Smith, ABC News.
Oh, that is a great story. Weather now with Jacqui McLaren. And Jacqui, a sunny day in Brisbane, but elsewhere very active across the state.
Yes, that's right, Jess. Good evening, Queensland. Ex-tropical cyclone Kirrily is currently sitting in the Gulf waters. It is a slow-moving system and has intensified today as it continues to take on more moisture, bringing heavy rainfall and damaging winds. 91 kilometres per hour recorded at Mornington Island today and 161 millimetres of rainfall recorded overnight just south of Burketown. The heavy rainfall is likely to continue in these parts over the next 24 hours. 100 to 200 millimetres is expected and 300 millimetres possible in isolated areas as well. And due to the heavy rainfall, we have seen major flooding in the Flinders River and there is a current minor flood warning for the Cloncurring River in these areas too. Elsewhere, there's a current severe weather warning north of Townsville and south of Innisfail with heavy rainfall and flash flooding possible overnight. And as we know, there is potential low developing in the Coral Sea. And at this stage, a very low chance of development, but more on that later. Still very hot in the southwest of the state. Birdsville reaching 43, but cooler in Toowoomba at 27 degrees. Blue skies again today in Brisbane with a top of 32, 30 on the Gold Coast. To photos now, and Melissa was in awe when she woke up to the sky at Redcliffe this morning. Meanwhile, Vic found the cloud cover in Cairns particularly breathtaking. Thanks for the photos. Taking a look at the satellite, and we can see the remains of ex-tropical cyclone Kirrily in the northwest, which is what's bringing the heavy thunderstorm activity that we have been experiencing. And on the chart, the Bureau will be watching this low pressure system closely. And at this stage, only a very low chance of that developing into a cyclone mid next week. But at the moment, the focus does remain on the low in the northwest. And that will continue to bring further heavy falls as it tracks north and then U-turns south over the weekend, as we mentioned earlier. Meanwhile, southern parts will enjoy mostly fine conditions due to a high pressure system that's pushing out into the Tasman Sea. Interstate tomorrow, heatwave conditions easing in Perth, but still in for a very hot one at 39 degrees, 39 for Alice Springs too, but a windy and cool day in Hobart at 18. To forecast now, and showers and storms expected over northern and eastern parts of the tropics, 31 for Thursday Island. Inland and mostly fine Thargomindah though, expecting a scorching 41. Mostly sunny in the southeast as well with a top of 33 for Bundaberg and slightly warmer for Warwick at 35. Blue skies continuing in Brisbane tomorrow with a top of 33 and 35 expected for Ipswich. And looking to the bay now, winds 15 knots, seas around 1 metre and sunrise will be at 5:20 a.m. as well. And looking ahead, a sunny weekend is on the cards both in the city and Ipswich, but Jess, it's looking like those showers will return early next week.
Oh, we'll have to make the most of the weekend. Thank you, Jacqui. Before we go, a look ahead to tomorrow night and an extended edition of ABC News. I'll speak with the Premier Stephen Miles in the first of our monthly in-depth interviews for Stateline. Until then, thank you for your company. 7:30 with Sarah Ferguson is up next. Good night.